GM Growth Farm. Today I have with me Luke, who is the developer advocate at Celestia. Celestia, as you already know, is one of the largest modular blockchains within the space. It has earned a huge name for itself, project that I've been following for a while now. And I wanted to dive deep into it with Luke to understand the different facets of it and Luke themselves as a person who has had a fascinating journey. So, Luke, thank you so much for doing this and being here today.
Thanks for having me, man. Really happy to be here.
Awesome, lovely. So, my first question to you is actually not related to crypto, not related to Web3, but I want to know, where does your love for techno and music come from? Because, like, you're probably one of the only people that I've seen have such varied interests. And I'm really curious to know where that comes from.
I mean, I love that electronic music in general merges like my analytical and creative brains. You can, especially like, Western electronic music, you can think about it in terms of math. One bar of music is 4 beats. 4 beats can be divided into, sort of smaller subsections of that. And you could think mathematically about what a good groove is. That you have your kicks on the 1, 2, 3, 4. You create syncopation by having hi-hats on the offbeat. So there's a mathematical approach to it. You can say, okay, intuitively, I know this will work. But I think if your grooves are pure math, you might think, oh, well, it sounds kind of boring. And then there's that the creativity that comes in from it, where you can sort of create this structure based on math and then play with it and have fun based on sort of just how you're feeling. That you think, okay, this is good, but this groove's getting boring, so let's remove 20% of it. Let's add some randomness in. Let's do this. And that's even just the math of a groove, but a sound too. Like when you think of a synthesizer produces a sound, you have, say, like a sine wave, and then you're going to modulate that sine wave and do different things with it. And you're going to, filter it and just take certain frequencies. So there's this very analytical math approach and then the creativity. So that's why I think what really made me love making techno, I grew up dancing to techno. I grew up in the East Coast of the US, and there's this big rave scene in the East Coast of the US in like the early to mid 90s. And that was my like first exposure to going to raves, going to parties at a time when, this was the 90s. So there was no real internet. I mean, there was, internet in, universities and stuff, but like it was kind of like what you see in a movie. Like to find out where a party is, you'd get a flyer and have some numbers on it. And it's like, the day of the party, you'd have to call the number and it would tell you to go to this place. You sort of drive around and try to find it. You start looking for cars that had like similar bumper stickers or were playing music as you, so you could follow them to the party destination. And then at the party, you had to collect all the flyers because you need to know like where the next party was going to be and all this stuff. So that was my youth, my high school years. And it was like so much fun. I loved it. Like I feel really lucky that I got to experience that whole world before smartphones came along. And, like sometimes I feel like documenting things it takes you out of the moment. Like you're not present in the moment when you're documenting things. And also a party is about just letting loose and having a really good time. And it's easier to do that when you don't feel like somebody could be taking your picture or putting you online somewhere. I've never been to Berlin, but I think I love what I've read about the Berlin clubs, that they like kick you out if you take a picture. I think that's how all clubs should be.
So how did that journey from almost like techno to coming to India, spending time here, learning Sanskrit, which I think half of Indians don't know at this point, doing yoga? How did you go from techno to yoga is what I'm really curious to know.
Well, okay. So, I worked, okay, this is high school years in the 90s. I went to school for computer science I started university in 95, a place called Drexel in Philadelphia. Lasted a year and a half, like as the 90s were when the internet boom happened. It's funny, I remember exactly where I was when I learned about Netscape going public. I was in high school and I remember coming downstairs, and my mom was a social worker who like sort of knew I was into tech but didn't really know what it was. I remember she called me, she goes, "Honey, have you seen this story on the news? This company that made an internet something or other just went public and everybody's a millionaire now. Have you ever heard of this Netscape Navigator before?" "Yes, Mom, I have." But so I got really into just technology in the 90s too. It was a lot of fun. I was in AP computer science in high school, and I dropped out of school in 96, moved to San Francisco, worked for some internet companies. And that's what brought me to tech. If you want to talk about the yoga thing, it was it was kind of funny because I was your typical nerdy, slightly effeminate kid who loved computer science, he loved science, loved all these classes, and hated gym. I remember in PE class, I would sort of stand off to the side, worried that the boys would throw a ball at my face and stuff. Like I just hated physical activity, but I think I hated it because I was bad at it, and I was uncoordinated, and I felt dumb for lack of a better word. And which is really a sad thing because physical activity is it's something we're realizing now how important physical activity is and how important it is to take care of not just your mind, but this vessel that holds onto your mind. And it wasn't until I got to San Francisco that I started exercising and started going to the gym and stuff. And then yoga was huge back then. I think San Francisco was one of the few places that yoga was big. And I kind of just wandered into a yoga studio, took a class, loved it. It was taught by this American who had gone to India in the 70s, became good friends with him. And I remember when he told me, it was this style of yoga popularized by this guy, Patabi Joyce, who was in Mysore near Bangalore. And that people got excited. I'd been going to classes there for a year or two. They're like, but Bobby Joyce is coming. He's coming on tour. He's coming on tour. And I thought, oh, cool, man. I'm going to get to meet this guy finally. And it was fucking wild. So they, at least, I don't know, in my mind, it was wild. They had rented like a school gymnasium. There were about 400 people who showed up for his class. And you had this like Indian man who was like 85 years old, sort of shuffling around, spoke virtually no English, but had been teaching people from all over the world for years. There was this point where I'm in this pose where I'm like sitting on the ground with I can't really see my legs up, holding onto my legs. And this 80-year-old man comes behind me, squats down, hugs me, and sort of lifts me a couple centimeters off the ground. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, like if this man can teach a room of 400 people, walk around and physically lift me off the ground, then I want what he's doing. Whatever he's doing has obviously worked really well. And that's how I want to keep taking care of my body. The dot-com bust happened and I kind of like was a bit lost. Remember, like the bust happened and I kind of worked for some companies for a while. I managed to hold on to sort of random jobs, but I finally got laid off this one job. Was a bit lost. Like all my coworkers decided to go out and get drunk. And I thought, you know what? I'm not really into getting drunk that much anymore. So you guys do your thing. I went to yoga and I told him, this guy, Larry, who ran the studio, I'm like, Larry, man, lost my job. Don't know what to do. And he walked out and gave me a big hug. He goes, you're going to teach yoga and I'm going to teach you how. That's kind of how it happened. Ended up going to India, all that stuff.
That's fascinating. And then I know you've spoken about like how there are like similarities that you personally have seen with how the internet was in the 90s, how tech was in the 90s, and you're seeing sort of some of that porting over, playing over into what's happening in blockchain, and so on and so forth. I know a lot of people say eh, that, yeah, we're sort of in the early internet days of blockchain and crypto and so on and so forth. But I really want to understand from your perspective, because you've so deeply seen both these worlds, what kind of similarities have you seen? Why do you state that?
Yeah, dude, it was like, so I moved for context, I moved to San Francisco when I was 19 years old. I dropped out of school, I was living on the East Coast in a city called Philadelphia, moved to San Francisco, didn't know anyone in the city. And, this was still a time when long distance phone calls in the US were very expensive. So like, even though I was within the same country, it was very isolating. I couldn't talk to my friends and my family very often or else it'd be too expensive. So I moved to San Francisco. I got this job. And what was wild was that San Francisco, I mean, people in San Francisco like to joke that nobody's from there. People just sort of show up there. And that's really what it was. We were all these people who had come from all over to work for internet companies. Fortunately, there were a whole bunch of people at my company who were in a similar boat as me. They had moved there. They were they were 10 years older than me, but they'd moved there alone. They had no friends. So we sort of became friends. But so much of our world and our social scene was people who worked for internet companies. So we were all going to the same parties, the same events. We knew friends who worked at different companies. We had this social circle. And we all like to think that whatever path we were taking at the time was the correct one. But, to be completely logical and fair, nobody really knows what the future is going to hold. And no one really knew which internet direction was going to win. But we knew that the internet was going to be the future. We knew that somehow this TCP/IP was going to be going to be underpinning everything that was coming in the future. I was writing Java applets at the time. I thought it was going to be Java applets going to be the future. Of course, I was wrong, but at least I was right that, the internet was the future. And so we had this group of people coming together because we believed in a technology and we believed in what we were building. And it was a very small community of people that all knew each other. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. We all know the blockchains are the future. Is it going to be Celestia's modular direction? I think so. But, like, to be completely fair, maybe not. It could be a different direction. Different directions could win, or maybe there'll be multiple winners. But we know blockchain technology is going to be the future of the internet. And we all kind of know each other. Like, before we were in San Francisco, we went to the same bars and parties. Now we're spread out across the world, but we go to the same conferences. We're in the same Telegram groups, the same Discords. So it's, in that way, it's very similar. And I think the vibes and the energy and the excitement of it, where especially when companies are small and they're startups, there's a agility and an ability to move quickly and to figure things out and to just sort of like use this technology in any way we can to solve these problems. And those are where those similarities are. And of course,
Deal.
what's funny too is that in '96, I was the 19-year-old, thinking, okay, I'm, this 19-year-old kid dropped out of school doing my thing. And they're all the 40-year-old gray hair people in the company, and me thinking, oh, those 40-year-olds trying to do, and now I'm like the 40-year-old, it is gray under all this hair dye. It's funny how quickly I went from being the 19-year-old whiz kid programmer to being yeah. That's sort of, but that's what I'm sort of rambling here, but that's what makes it fun too. There's something about being in young industries or being around like a lot of really young people, that they have this energy and this excitement and this belief that anything's possible. And they're not old and jaded, which is what happens to a lot of people when they get to be my age.
You don't look a day over 25, Luke, just by the way.
I'll be 48 in a month.
Oh my Lord, that's
Yeah.
amazing. The
Probably should
yoga
call
is
me
really
uncle or
helping
something,
you.
right? I think it's working with young people helps a lot too, because it's like, it's that mindset that young people have, that they can do anything, and that they can do anything, that anything's possible, and they have unlimited time. And of course, you don't have unlimited time. Life catches up with you very quickly. But this belief that you can figure things out and make anything happen is an energy I'd just love to be around.
That's awesome. Well, let's take a beat and talk about Celestia. I know that you have spent a lot of time talking about different kind of ways how you can port over people from Web 2 or still in internet companies into Web 3, and how Celestia plays a role in that. I'm really curious to know, like, from a developer engagement perspective, when you're speaking to developers who are in Web 2, what is your pitch to them? How do you communicate to them? Okay, Celestia is the ship you should jump on board and come into Web3.
I think one of the first things is clearing up misconceptions about what a Web3 app is. When people think about a Web3 app, they think, okay, it's an NFT project, or it's a token, or it's a DeFi thing. And those are Web3 things, but a token or an NFT doesn't make you an NFT project, or doesn't make you a Web3 project. And to me, what really defines Web3 is verifiability. Like, can you trustlessly verify the state of something? Can you trustlessly verify that something was done? And that's what defines a Web3 project. And then I think when you dive in and you talk to people about why verifiability is important, why we're not depending on trusted third parties, we're not depending on governments. And I think that it's easier to describe it to people from different countries, people who've lived under censorship, or people who've lived in places where governments have seized assets, or they get it really quickly. But when you explain to people that the core of what makes a Web3 app is verifiability, that's when they really start to grok, okay, that's what it is. And then when I explain how easy it is to build a verifiable app on top of Celestia, people get it really, really quickly. For a long time, when you thought about building on Celestia, people thought, okay, Celestia is a platform for instantly deploying rollups or creating your own blockchain. And that's true. But now we're at this, Celestia's been around for a couple of years now, and there are a lot of great rollups and a lot of that already exist on Celestia. So now our focus is on promoting these rollups, promoting these platforms. And a good example of this one is this project Chopin we've been doing a lot of work with. And Chopin, it pretty much it's a tool you can take any Web 2 app, specifically Next.js apps, but really any Web 2 app, and you can instantly add verifiability to it. So basically what Chopin sort of attaches onto this Next.js app, it creates a reverse proxy and attaches onto it, and any state change transaction gets stored as a blob on Celestia, which allows you to replay the app state. You can prove that Arnav did this, and it's a really easy way to create a verifiable app. And it's a Web3 app, and you don't need a token, you don't need an NFT, you don't need all these things.
What do you think is the biggest mistakes or let's say, misconceptions that a lot of other Web3 projects have when they're trying to onboard developers. Like, there's pretty much a new chain, a new protocol, a new product that comes into the market every week. Everybody's trying to target the next billion developers and users that are wanting to come into Web3, but so few are able to crack it. What do you feel like is the main issue that holds them back in order to be able to do that?
One thing I care a lot about is, I guess, accessibility would be the right word. Accessibility, like really thinking about how we can educate a billion people or how we can educate a million developers. And for so long, so much of the education in the Web3 space, it has targeted a very specific type of learner. Like it targets a very analytical, nerdy, text-based learner. And people who, these are people who can just look at a set of black and white docs, read them, instantly grok it. But there's so many more coders out there. There's so many more different types of builders out there. So at Celestia, starting since the beginning of the year, actually since last year, we've been subtitling all of our videos. So all of our videos, they're in English, but they've got subtitles in Thai, Vietnamese, Japanese, Korean, Spanish. Let's see. So, Japanese, Vietnamese. I think I got them all. So we're heavily subtitling our videos because we want our education to reach out to people regardless of their linguistic background. But we also think a lot about how to create stuff for different types of learners. You have text-based learners, I think, are taken care of already. But a lot of people are visual learners. And, I think if you can think back to a professor maybe you had in university or high school who just taught a great class, he could be up there in front of the board. The kids wouldn't be bored. They'd be mesmerized. They'd be drawn in. He might bring in props or he'd find different ways to explain complicated topics. And those types of professors are just those amazing teachers we've had growing up. And I try to channel those professors when I create my videos, because I think videos aren't for text-based learners. Text-based learners have docs and they're fine already. So when I create a video, I really think about this whole, these millions of people who are visual learners and who learn in different ways. And if we're going to really onboard the next million people, we need to create content, educational content in their language, and we need to create educational content that appeals to people who learn in much different ways.
I was going to talk about that. Like, I think Celestia and other players, I think, have realized the fact that building and investing in video content is becoming increasingly important, no matter who you're targeting, whether that's developers, users, investors, so on and so forth. It's a critical piece of that. But I know personally that you've actually spent a lot of time doing video production. You would run a video production company as well. I want to understand, like, when you are trying to talk to a technical audience through videos, I know there is a way to get it right and there is a way to get it wrong. So what's the way that you perceive has been able to have the highest impact? Because I feel like Celestia, although is one of many players, but you definitely are on the frontier and have been able to gather a larger audience in a different part of the world because of your video content.
Thank you. I think one of the biggest mistakes people do with video is they assume a video is just a moving version of a written tutorial, whereas our approach is much more about how we can use the written medium and the visual medium to create a cohesive whole. Most of my videos are short, like 5 to 10 minutes, and I use videos to explain topics. Like I'll explain a topic and I try to think of visual ways and props and other diagrams to do it, and really make sure people grok the topic and understand stuff. Sometimes I'll take a code base that I've already written and I'll walk people through the code base and explain aspects of it. But I don't think video is the perfect medium to actually teach coding. I mean, it's a pain in the ass to like see those words, especially if maybe your vision's bad, you sort of like lean in and you look at things and like pausing, and you can't copy and paste from video unless, at least on YouTube, there's some special platforms out there you can copy and paste from, but that's not the best thing. So the approach we try to take is okay, let's make a really good video. It's about 10 minutes long, explain all the topics, walk people through the code base, and then point them to a longer written tutorial where we can break down the code, they can copy and paste it, they can play with it, and then also release in a repository. People can fork the repository and build off of that code. So you get all sorts of different learners in there. But the other thing that people forget about video is that video is a visual medium. And if I'm just going to sit here and talk to the camera, there's no reason to make that a video. You need to be out there explaining things using diagrams or props or whiteboards or just something that draws in the visualness of video. One more thing on this too, I think the other problem people really have with video is they've refused to edit. And it's so funny because people will like they'll take a written tutorial and they'll edit it really nicely, and they'll have a video where they'll do things like, maybe a transaction is posting and MetaMask is spinning, and they're like, okay, let's just wait for this to finish. Like, no, you don't wait for it to finish. You edit out those 30 seconds. Like, or you say, whoops, and I do it again. Oh, you edit that out. Like, you need to aggressively edit your videos so you have only the stuff that's absolutely completely necessary.
I'm guilty of that, so I'll admit.
I know it takes time, but it's so important. If you want people to get to the end of the video, like I did video production for years. So I did a lot of corporate work, YouTube work, I did TV and movie production. It, we thought a lot about how do we get people to the end of the video. And a lot of people, there's this vanity metric. You post a video on Twitter, and I don't know, like people watch a few seconds of it and it counts as a view. On YouTube, it's a bit longer. I think it's like 30 seconds to count as a view. But people take that as a vanity metric. Oh, I got 20,000 views. But if they're only the first 4 seconds, who the fuck cares? Like, so you have to think about a video of each like 5 or 10 seconds is what you're doing, pushing people to get to the next 5 or 10 seconds. Like, and is there any point in that video where people might drop off and leave you? And if there is, then you haven't edited it right.
Do you also feel like, in terms of, let's say, especially with a team that doesn't have a lot of resources to put into video editing, or maybe that's really not their expertise, what do you tell them? Like, let's say there's a project earlier stage in Celestia trying to do video content. What's your, like, say, 3 top pieces of advice to them to make their videos, maybe not from an editing perspective perfect, but enough so that they can keep the attention of their audience?
For me, it's about just aggressively planning. You really need to just plan it out really, really well. You don't need to spend a lot of money on technology. I mean, most like decent cell phones are way better cameras than I even could, spend thousands of dollars on 10 years ago. I use this mic, Hollyland Lark M2, which costs about $150. Hooks up to my camera, but has an attachment you can plug into an iPhone. So if you have a decent phone and you can buy a mic for $100, $200, that's all the technology you really need. And then you just need to really, really plan your video. Think about it shot by shot, what needs to happen. Graphics don't have to be amazing. Like if you don't know how to do graphics, you don't know how to use, all these things. There's all sorts of tools you can use now. Even a whiteboard. Like, if you have a whiteboard in your office, you can draw your own graphics and create them. So there's a lot of ways to do this stuff. And you don't need to invest a lot of money in the technology behind it, but you do need to invest time. Editing, that's the other thing about editing, it's not hard anymore. It used to be you had to learn all these advanced programs, and Adobe Premiere has a pretty hard learning curve and you have to spend some money on it. But now DaVinci Resolve in the basic version, which is plenty, is free. Movie is great for editing a lot of stuff. There are a lot of mobile tools. And because the tooling has gotten so affordable, I mean, the tooling is affordable, but you still need to really treat it the way you would a written piece. You're going to edit it, you're going to plan and edit it, type of thing.
That's awesome. Another aspect that you're very heavily involved in that I'm really curious to know is because I've seen Celestia having a slightly different approach to developer events and the kind of engagement that you do in person. What is it that you've been able to do successfully with Celestia in physical events to stand out and carve out sort of like a unique space in the minds of developers or just people in general that attend your events?
Well, let's talk about 2 things. We put on a lot of great events, but we just put on a hackathon called the Mammothon. It was a virtual hackathon. People had the month of February to build products, but we also had some IRL events that we put on to support it around it. But the thing is, our whole take with this hackathon is that we wanted to really be involved in these builders, create apps in our ecosystem. Prizes were good, like there's 11 prizes of $25,000 US each, which is, unless you're in New York or San Francisco, that can definitely be seed money to run your company for a year. But it wasn't just that the hackathon ended and we said, okay, here's your 25 grand, let's take a picture, thank you for showing up. But it was this hackathon ended, okay, and we're working with all these builders now, helping them get introductions to VCs, helping them get into incubators, helping them get the support they need to really turn their product into a startup. Besides just giving decent prizes and having a lot of good post-hackathon support, we mandated that people hack in teams. You had to have at least 3 to 5 people in a team. It didn't have to all be coders. In fact, we hoped that people would have product managers and marketers and BD people and other people coming in. And the reason for that was twofold. One, that we just knew better products come when there's diverse brains and different viewpoints coming together. But also we wanted people to approach creating a team in the same way they'd approach creating a company. Because if they had a great team that produced a great product, the likelihood of that going on to becoming a startup that got funding and goes on to be highly successful is much, much higher. So it's this approach that we really care, and not just providing lip service to that, but we care about the ecosystem and we care about these builders, and we're going to do whatever it fucking takes to make them successful.
That's really awesome. And like, nobody does that. Does anybody do? I don't think so. Like, I
I'm
know,
sure other people do. I mean, I hate to say, oh, we're the only one, because I'm sure there are a lot of
no,
other
but
people who do
as
really
a
good stuff too.
marketer, I don't think I've ever been invited to a hackathon, and I've
Ooh,
been in the
dude,
space for
check this
7
out.
years.
Okay, here's the alpha. This is what we're planning. So Mammothon 1 wrapped up and was really successful. Mammothon 2 is happening in the fall, but we haven't even announced this yet. So your podcast could be the first place it shows up. We are planning a boot camp too. And the boot camp will run a month before it. I mean, you can just Mammothon if you want. But what's unique about our boot camp is we're going to have 2 tracks. There's going to be a product track and an engineering track. Product is, sometimes people like to say technical, non-technical, but I hate those words because I feel like it's, by saying you're kind of defining something by what it isn't instead of what it is. And so the product track the product track will be 3 weeks and the engineering track will be 3 weeks. Product track, you'll learn about marketing. You'll learn about how to do market research, how to find a problem that you want to solve, how to talk to people to see what their needs are, to really like create a product spec and build a product. And then the engineering track during those 3 weeks, we'll be learning about different stacks on Celestia and building on Celestia. Those tracks will merge for week 4. Week 4, you will there'll be the same lessons, but also be a opportunity for people to meet people, so that marketing people can meet BD people, can meet builders, and then with the goal of forming teams to then go on and hack at Mammothon. It really is a hackathon for marketers, product managers, anybody who wants to who wants to exist in this space. So
Absolutely.
I'm
Really
sorry you've been
looking
left
forward to
out for
that.
all these years, but yes, you and your friends are welcome.
I'm curious to know, like, when you're now seeing the advent of wipe coding and you're seeing Anthropic and OpenAI say, like, hey, probably pretty much all of development will be taken over by AI within this year or next year, maybe within a couple of years. Do you think, like, one, is that actually going to happen? Because I believe that not to be the case, having tried to wipe code a lot of things myself. And the second thing is, in terms of the Web3 stack, do you feel like is there any spillover that you're seeing in person? Like, okay, clearly seeing a trend. People are using a lot of Cursor, a lot of Bolt, or a lot of Webflow, a lot of these tools that exist out there to build applications. Or do you feel like no, there's still some time until it enters into the Web3 realm?
I mean, I think if you're underestimating AI, you're going to be left in the dust, because it is amazing the developments that have happened in really, like, I mean, this is all post COVID, right? So it's the last like 3 years, all these developments have happened, and we've gone at rocket speed. I use AI video tools extensively now to like in all my videos to create all this stuff that I either couldn't do before, would have had to pay someone to do before. But and I think, but in terms of where we are now, April 2025, I use Cursor a lot when I'm coding, and I feel like AI coding tools make a good programmer great, and they make a great programmer amazing. But they're not at the point where I can say, okay, build me a DeFi protocol. But they are at the point where they can say, okay, let's create a smart contract. Now I want you to write a function that does this. Now I want you to write a test that does this. Now let's run this test against the function, and I want you to look at the outputs and see if we need to make any changes. So you need to be a good prompt engineer, at least now in April 2025. And you need to have experience building something. So maybe you're building a React thing. You say, okay, yeah, this is a React site. You need to build this component, this component, this component, and tie them together. So it makes a good programmer great. And it also raises the bar for the quality of the work we accept. I had a talk in a Telegram group about this recently, that 3 or 4 years ago in a hackathon, if something had a really bunk, lousy UI, you might think, okay, whatever, the UI sucks, but these guys aren't designers. But now in a hackathon, we expect everything to have really nice UI, to have colors that sort of speak to the brand. And, if you click on a button, there should be a spinner, and it should be responsive, and it should do all these things. So we're raising the bar on what we expect in terms of quality, because we know stuff could be done much, much faster.
And so we're finally solving the UI UX problem in crypto for once and for all, and it's going to take
I
AI to do
sure,
it.
I sure hope so. Yeah, I should hope so.
Do you also feel like, in terms of, if everybody can be, let's say, a good programmer becomes great, and there are a lot of great programmers out there in the market, then, and I know a lot of people have spoken about, okay, then distribution becomes the moat for you to have an edge in the open market. But from, let's say, Celestia's perspective, where a lot of apps are being built on you or using your tech stack, how do you perceive your moat changing going into the future when anybody and everybody can build? Let's say not right now, maybe in 3 4 years, might take that long. But then how does your moat change as Celestia?
I mean, our moat gets wider and wider as we increase new product, as we release new products. One of the things I'm most excited about, as you can read about it on our blog, but it's something called lazy bridging. And lazy bridging basically solves the problem that we have now with Ethereum L2s. If you have, ETH on Optimism and you want to move that to Base, it's a pain, right? So what lazy bridging does, it's going to be a canonical bridge that unites assets across all rollups on Celestia. So that if you have liquidity on one rollup, it'll be instantly available on another one. And that's going to be a huge moat because that gives you access to users and liquidity in a way that you don't get when you build on an Ethereum L2. And other
That's
things we're building too. But I think the other thing too is the support we get just through our support we give people, that we really. So I started Celestia just about 5 months ago, and one of my goals when I was searching for a job is I wanted to join a DevRel team. I thought, okay, as long as there's at least, one or two other people there, I'll have people to bounce ideas off of and people to work on. But it also feel like there's an institutional commitment to DevRel. It's not just like, I think a lot of protocols are like, oh, we need a DevRel to do stuff, I don't know, like write docs or marketing or write tweets or who knows. But I wanted to be part of a team because I wanted to feel like the protocol or the leadership or whoever's up top really, really feels that it's super important, and that's part of our moat too, that we care about our builders and we want them to be really successful. One of the reasons they hired me living in Bangkok is that I can be kind of anywhere in Asia really quickly. I'll be in Korea next week. When we were doing the Mammothon, I was at IRL events all over Asia, so it's easy. It's 2 3 hours for me to hop on a plane and get to these events.
Do you also feel like, and I was going to ask you this before, but given that you're spending a lot of time and effort and energy into creatively positioning yourselves differently, whether that's through your mammoth mascot, whether that's the just the effort that you guys put in into your visuals, into the brand. I also even saw some of the creatives that came out of East Denver at some of the IRL events that you did. I actually spoke about it specifically, how you used and I think you had a hand to play in it, but how you guys used the OG Mac computer desktop, and then you had the mammoth coming out of it, and then you had
That
a
was
tagline in it.
yeah,
Uh,
I can't take any credit for that.
But I just feel like, and I want to ask you because obviously you're more on the front lines of it. Do you feel like that is also going to be sort of a significant advantage that people will have to put in a lot of time and effort into?
Yeah, I mean, if you have branding that people resonate with, it's definitely just people. How should we say this? People are attracted by funness, and if they feel like a brand is fun and relatable, they're gonna like it. And I just to be completely clear, I take no credit for any of Celestia's marketing. Like, I help out here and there, but it is definitely like Ikram and the rest of the team are the brains behind it. But I think we really lucked out with this mammoth mascot. I feel like a lot of teams kind of shoehorn a mascot on and they have to kind of like invent a character, but mammoths really worked. We're talking about it's about our block size increasing. So we've got mammoth blocks, and mammoth size blocks enable you to build any kind of application. You're not limited by really tiny block sizes. So our mammoth blocks enable mammoth applications, enable all the stuff. And plus mammoths are cute. Now, I mean, everybody loves elephants anyway. I think elephants are probably one of the most lovable animals in the world. And like a mammoth is an elephant with like fur and hair, and our like company colors are pink and purple, so we can make a lovable pink purple mammoth that everybody wants to hug and relate to. So I think we're lucky that we were able to come up with a mascot that really worked for us.
That's amazing. And then final question to you, Luke, is what's coming up going forward? Like, what's a challenge that you guys are solving? What solution you're building towards? I know you spoke about the boot camp. Is there anything else that people should be paying attention to and being excited about?
I mean, that's really it. Like my 80% of what I'm going to spend the rest of the year on is the boot camp and Mammothon version 2, which will be End of the year. I'm not sure exactly what month yet. Boot camp is going to be really well done. We're going to be filmed. We'll film most of it. There'll be some sync stuff, but we're planning all that now. The lessons are, it's not going to be just, I think sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of the educational materials around boot camp or like hackathons can feel very shoehorned in, done last minute, recorded quickly on cheap cameras, not edited down, but we're planning now to film a few months in advance. So it's going to be really well done. And just this environment that welcomes anybody, regardless of their background, into the fold and teaches them like how you can have this great career. And even me, like my background, I worked in tech, but then I left for 20 years and, taught yoga and Pilates and ran this video production company. I got back into tech during lockdown because I just had no work, nothing to do. And I felt very lucky that I was able to just reinvent myself in the crypto space and create a new job for myself and get a job I can work remote and travel the world and do all these other things too. And we want to be clear that type of lifestyle, that type of job, that type of opportunity is something that anybody can achieve. And it's not just for Solidity devs anymore. It's anybody who wants to work in this space. And so we're going to educate you. We're going to help you meet people, help you make connections, and we're going to hold your hand through the whole process, and we're going to hold your hand until you're successful.
That's amazing to hear. I think that's a perfect way to wrap up this conversation. I feel like we touched on so many different aspects within like developer relations, engagement, and advocacy that a lot of the time that mostly conversations become about like, okay, how is your tech stack better than the 10 million others that exist out there? What kind of grants are we giving you? How can we get you excited that way? I think this conversation gave me a very different perspective into Celestia, what you guys are planning, what you guys are doing, what you've personally been able to accomplish, and what kind of impact you've been able to have. So, Luke, thank you so much for this conversation. It was really, really fun.
Thank you, man. And I hope to meet you IRL very soon.
Awesome. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. GM and see you. Bye bye.
Bye, y'all.